I was standing at the head of my own dining table, bruised and aching, pouring coffee with both hands just to keep them from shaking. Darius was across from me, chewing like nothing had happened, like my face wasn't swollen from hitting the freezer door the night before. When the doorbell rang, he looked annoyed, until he saw Marcus in uniform, my sister Tasha with a folder full of proof, and Sister Elaine from church, all stepping into our perfect little breakfast scene. His smile cracked. He had no idea what I'd set in motion. He thought he was still in control. He had no clue what was coming. Friends, before we dive into this story, I want to ask for a small favor. If you believe stories like mine deserve to be heard, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means more than you know. Let's get into it. The handle of the coffee pot was slick from my sweating palms, and I gripped it tight with both hands so it wouldn't rattle when I poured. Darius sat at the head of the table, exactly where he always sat, acting like nothing was off, like I didn't have a dark bruise blooming along my jawline. He was humming between bites, smacking his lips while eating the chicken and waffles I made exactly the way he liked, crispy, hot, no syrup on the chicken. I stared at him chewing like it was just another Sunday morning. My face throbbed when I moved my mouth, but I chewed anyway, one small bite of waffle at a time. He didn't look at me, not once. That was his game, pretending it didn't happen, pretending I didn't hit the fridge door with my face, pretending our daughter hadn't screamed, pretending I wasn't sitting here with a funeral dress on and rage crawling just under my skin. I heard the clock ticking in the dining room. My heart beat louder. 7 minutes. 6. Then came the doorbell, and I saw his fork pause mid-air. He frowned like someone had interrupted his peace. I said, as steady as I could, "I invited a few people." He glanced at me, eyebrows raised like I was joking. I got up and went to the door before he could ask anything else. My hand was trembling, but I opened it wide. Marcus came in first, still in uniform, his badge catching the light. He gave Darius a nod that wasn't quite polite. Tasha followed, holding a thick manila envelope against her chest like it might jump out of her hands. And then Sister Elaine stepped in, quiet and sharp-eyed, like she already knew how this would go. Darius pushed back from the table and stood up, confused. "What's all this?" he said, trying to smile, trying to control the room like he always did. I walked back to the table, pulled out my chair, and sat down slowly. My hands were flat on the table, knuckles pale. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "They're here for me." His smile twitched, cracked. "Monique, what is this?" he asked, but his voice had changed, his charm slipping, fear bleeding in underneath. "We're just going to talk," I said, "about last night, about all the nights." Darius let out a dry, short laugh. "Talk? You bring your brother in here like I'm some criminal? Monique, what the hell is wrong with you?" His face darkened. I saw the shift, charm gone, mask gone, just him. I kept my hands still. "I hit my head on the fridge," I said, voice shaking. "Because you pushed me." He threw his napkin down. "Oh, come on. Now you're gonna do this in front of everybody? Make up stories like I'm some monster?" Marcus didn't move, but I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. Darius turned to him. "You really gonna sit there and let her lie?" Tasha opened the envelope and slid photos across the table, pictures of bruises, bank statements, my emergency room visit from 2 months ago. She didn't say a word. Then she laid the flash drive next to the coffee pot. I didn't say anything either. I just stared at him. The silence stretched. He looked at the flash drive like it might bite him. "You've been spying on me," he snapped. "Recording me?" His voice rose, and he looked around the table, waiting for someone to jump in and defend him. No one did. "You want to paint me like the bad guy now?" he shouted. "After everything I did for this family? You know what I've been through, what they did to me at that hospital. You knew how hard it's been, and now you're teaming up with them to destroy me too?" My heart twisted hearing him say that, because part of me still remembered the man I married, the one who danced in our kitchen with pancake batter on his shirt. But I pushed it down. I swallowed it. "You destroyed yourself," I said, barely above a whisper. "I tried to help you. I stayed. Even when you stopped being kind, even when you scared our daughter. His face shifted, just for a second, like he didn't expect that part, like he forgot she was part of this too. He looked away, jaw tight, hands clenched. She saw? He muttered, more to himself than to me. I nodded. She screamed, and that was the first time he didn't talk back. For a full 10 seconds, Darius was quiet. The room was thick with it. Shame, anger, silence. Marcus finally stood. Darius, I need you to come with me. We're just going to step outside and talk, all right? His voice was calm but firm. Darius laughed again, but it was bitter now, no smile behind it. You got your little audience, he muttered, pointing at me. Hope it was worth it. He walked past me slowly, and for a second, I thought he might try something, say something cruel under his breath, grab my wrist like he used to when no one was looking. But he didn't. He just walked out with Marcus, and the door closed behind them. I sat back in my chair, my body numb, my heart still thudding like a war drum. Sister Elaine reached over and touched my hand, gently, like she didn't want to startle me. You did the right thing, baby, she said. I nodded, but my stomach was flipping. Right and wrong didn't feel so clear. It felt like I'd dropped a grenade in the middle of my life, and now I was waiting to see what was left after the smoke cleared. I don't remember cleaning up the table. I just remember standing at the sink, running water over my hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Tasha was behind me, packing up the photos and the drive, already thinking about the next steps. We'll go to the hospital today, she said. Get a proper report filed. Marcus'll handle the paperwork. I'll go with you to the lawyer this week. I nodded, barely hearing her. I felt like I was floating outside my own body. Part of me kept expecting Darius to walk back in and laugh, say it was all a joke, wrap his arms around me like nothing happened. But he didn't. He was gone. I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window and saw the bruise again. It was still purple, still ugly, but I didn't look away this time. That mark wasn't my shame anymore. It was my proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I survived something. Proof that I was done hiding. I turned off the tap, dried my hands, and stood still for a long moment, breathing. The truth was out now. And once it's out, it doesn't go back in. That door had closed behind him, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to keep it shut. The paper on the exam table crackled under me every time I moved. I tried to sit still, but my leg kept bouncing without permission. The room was too white, too bright, cold. It smelled like bleach and cheap soap. The young resident, he couldn't have been older than 28, stood in front of me with gentle hands and a cautious voice. Can I tilt your chin up a little? I nodded without looking him in the eye. He leaned in, flashlight aimed at the bruise that still burned down my cheek like someone had branded me. I could smell coffee on his breath. Do you feel safe at home? He asked softly, but the words hit like a slap. I bit the inside of my cheek so I wouldn't cry. What the hell kind of question is that when I look like this? I didn't answer. Marcus was in the corner, arms crossed, still in uniform. He looked like a wall, stiff, silent, solid, but I knew his stomach was twisting just like mine. The nurse came in with a camera. I hated the sound it made, each click like a verdict. I turned my face when she asked, held up my arm when she gestured, and every part of it felt like betrayal. I felt like I was handing my marriage over in pieces. Here's his temper, here's his control, here's what love turned into when no one was looking. I wanted to leave the second they said we were done. I grabbed my jacket and practically ran out to the car, but Marcus didn't even start the engine right away. He just sat there with both hands on the wheel, like he needed to breathe before we moved. I kept my head against the window, not saying anything. My throat was tight, my jaw sore from clenching. I hated being there, hated that this was real, hated that I was the one sitting in the ER like some battered woman on TV. But most of all, I hated that part of me still felt protective of Darius. I kept remembering him in scrubs, exhausted, laughing over ramen at 2 a.m. while studying for boards. I loved that man, that version of him. I didn't know where he went. Marcus finally pulled away, and the ride to the station was quiet, except for the turn signals and the occasional static on his police radio. I felt like we were driving straight into something I couldn't undo, and I almost asked him to turn around. But I didn't, because Jade screamed last night. Because I hit that fridge so hard I saw white. Because pretending it wasn't that bad almost got me killed. The station was colder than the hospital somehow. Or maybe it was just me. I sat in a small room with buzzing lights and no windows. There was a box of tissues on the table, which told me everything I needed to know about what they expected to happen in there. A woman detective came in, older, with tired eyes. She introduced herself, but I forgot her name as soon as she said it. She pulled out a notepad and a recorder. "Just start where you feel comfortable," she said. I started with last night, with the argument, the bourbon, the slam. Then the words started pouring out faster than I could control them. I told her about the other times, how he took my phone for days, how he locked me in the bathroom once during an argument, how he threatened to leave with Jade and make sure I never saw her again. I told her about the time he threw a plate at the wall near my head and told me I was lucky he had restraint. She asked follow-ups. I answered. But in between the horror, my brain kept flashing to the good things. His laugh. The letter he wrote me when I graduated nursing school. The time he cried when Jade was born. My voice cracked over and over, like I didn't know which version of him I was reporting. Tasha had given me everything in one folder, and I slid it across the table without looking at it again. Inside was the flash drive with the ring footage, the screenshots of the late-night money transfers, and the copies of credit card statements in my name that I never opened. The detective opened the folder, nodded as she flipped through, and I could tell she'd seen worse. That made me feel small, forgettable, just another file in a stack of broken homes. She asked if I had a safe place to stay. I told her I was at Tasha's. She told me they'd log the evidence and get it to the right department. She explained the next steps like I was a witness in someone else's case. I nodded and nodded, but my head felt like it was floating. Then she slid a report across the table and asked for my signature. My hand hovered. That pen felt heavier than it should have been. I thought about Darius in the courtroom. I thought about Jade crying into her pillow. I thought about my mother's voice telling me not to air dirty laundry. And then I signed. Outside, the sun nearly blinded me. I squinted hard, breathing in the thick Houston heat. It was like the sky didn't care what had just happened. Cars kept driving by, people going about their day while I stood there like something had been scraped out of me. Marcus walked ahead toward the car, giving me space. I stood still on the sidewalk, hugging myself. I felt sick, hollow. But also, under all that, a tiny flicker of something I hadn't felt in months. Relief? No, not yet. But something close. I wasn't pretending anymore. I'd said the words. I had named the violence. And once you say it out loud, you can't make it invisible again. I walked toward the car slowly, legs heavy like I'd just run a marathon, even though all I did was sit and speak. But speaking had taken everything out of me. When I sat down and buckled the seatbelt, Marcus looked over and said nothing, just reached into the back seat and handed me a bottle of water. I took it with a shaky hand and whispered, "Thank you." That was all I could get out. And honestly, it was enough. The ride back to Tasha's felt different. I wasn't crying. I wasn't numb. I was just tired. My phone buzzed twice in my bag, probably Darius or someone on his side of the family, but I didn't check. I didn't want to read his version of the story. Not yet. Maybe not ever. We pulled into the driveway, and I saw Jade's face at the window, watching. She disappeared from view and ran to the door. When I stepped inside, she didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around me and held tight. I held her back, longer than I should have, because I needed that hug more than I wanted to admit. Tasha came in from the kitchen and gave me a look. Not pity, not judgment, just that quiet strength she has when she's ready to carry something with you. I sat down on the couch, finally able to breathe without worrying about someone stomping through the hallway behind me. I still felt like I had a hole in my chest, but for the first time, I also felt like I might be able to patch it. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but someday. And maybe that's what surviving actually looks like. One signed paper, one police report, one broken silence at a time. Jade hadn't said a word in over an hour. She sat curled into the far end of Tasha's couch like she was trying to disappear into it, one knee pulled to her chest, eyes fixed on some reality show I knew she wasn't watching. The volume was low, but the noise filled the room in a strange way, like a shield. 2 boxes of pizza sat open on the table, untouched. One was pepperoni, her favorite. I shifted a little closer, trying not to make her feel cornered. When my knee touched the cushion near her foot, she flinched just slightly, like I'd startled her. That tiny movement hit me harder than anything Darius ever did. My daughter flinched at me. My chest tightened so fast I had to grip my thigh to stay still. I wanted to reach for her, but I didn't. Instead, I said quietly, "We're staying here for a little while, baby, just until things settle." She didn't look at me, didn't blink. Then, in a small, dry voice, she asked, "Is Dad going to jail because of you?" I swear I stopped breathing. "Because of me?" I said back, more to myself than to her. And those 3 words cut me straight through. Tasha was pacing behind the couch, barefoot, phone in her hand, eyebrows pinched so tight it looked like a permanent frown. My mother was on speaker, her voice sharp and fast. "You couldn't handle this in your own house," she was saying. "Did you have to bring the police into it? After everything that man's been through?" Tasha rolled her eyes, put the phone on mute, and mouthed, "Do you want me to hang up?" I shook my head. I didn't even know what I wanted. Mama's voice came back loud when Tasha unmuted her. "And now what? People at church gonna be talking. You think they won't? Monique Harris got her husband locked up. You know how it looks when a black woman drags her man in front of white law like that. Ruined his career. And now this." I pressed 2 fingers to my temple. I wanted to scream. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say, "He did this to himself." But the words didn't come. The guilt had already crawled in and set up camp. I felt like I'd betrayed everyone. Darius, my mother, my own people. My marriage wasn't just broken. It was public now, and I didn't know how to live with that. Suddenly, Jade threw the remote down, turned toward me and said, "It wasn't the first time I saw him hit you." Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed on mine. I blinked. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I heard it, from my room, and sometimes I saw it," she said, quieter now. "One time I saw him shove you in the hallway, and you told me he was just playing, that it was a grown-up argument." She looked down. "I've been sleeping with headphones on for months." My whole body went still. Shame wrapped around my ribs so tight I could barely move. I didn't know she knew. I thought I was hiding it. I thought I was shielding her. "Baby," I whispered, reaching out. This time she didn't flinch. She fell into me, suddenly, like her body gave out. Her arms wrapped around my waist and she started crying, big broken sobs that soaked right through my shirt. I held her as tight as I could. "I'm sorry," I kept saying. "I didn't know. I thought I was protecting you. But I wasn't. I was just teaching her how to stay quiet like I did." Tasha finally hung up the phone and sat on the other side of us, rubbing Jade's back while she cried into my lap. We didn't speak for a while. The room felt softer somehow, like it was letting us feel without rushing us past it. My mind kept going back to the night before. The slam, the scream, the look on Jade's face when she saw me crumpled by the fridge. How had I let it get that far? I kept thinking about every time I told myself he was just stressed, that he didn't mean it, that it would pass. And all that time, my daughter was hearing it through her bedroom wall, wearing headphones, living inside a storm she couldn't name. I'd been so busy managing the chaos, patching it up, pretending we were fine, that I didn't see her drowning with me. I thought I was being strong. All I was doing was normalizing violence for her, showing her that love was supposed to hurt, that silence was survival. That made me sick. Later that night, Jade was finally asleep in Tasha's guest room, curled up in one of her cousin's old, oversized t-shirts. I stood in the doorway watching her breathe, thinking how small she looked in that bed. Tasha came up behind me with a blanket and rested her chin on my shoulder. "You did what you had to do," she whispered. "No one wants to break up a family. But you didn't break it. He did. I nodded, but I didn't feel noble or brave. I felt broken. I felt exposed. Mama had texted me twice since we hung up, still pushing her point. You should have kept this in the family. But I knew in my bones now that in the family meant hidden, buried, and passed down. I wasn't going to do that to my daughter. I wasn't going to teach her that silence was strength or that image mattered more than truth. That night, I sat on Tasha's couch alone, wrapped in the blanket, phone face down, and made a quiet decision. My first loyalty was to my child's safety, not to my mother's pride, not to the church, not to Darius, not even to the memory of who we used to be. The guilt didn't disappear just because I made the right choice. It stayed with me like a bruise under the skin, tender, sore, always there. But for the first time, I wasn't letting guilt drive the car. I was holding my own steering wheel, even if my hands were still shaking. I thought about what kind of woman I wanted Jade to see when she grew up. I didn't want her to see a woman who kept quiet to keep the peace. I wanted her to see a woman who told the truth, even when it hurt. A woman who got out. A woman who chose herself. I glanced down the hallway toward the room where she slept and whispered, "We're gonna be okay, baby. I swear to you, we will." I didn't know if I believed it yet, but I needed her to hear it. And I needed to keep saying it until one day it stopped being a promise and started being the truth. The leather chair squeaked when I sat down, and the noise made me flinch even though no one else seemed to notice. The office was cool, quiet, and smelled like fresh coffee and old printer ink. Everything about it felt like another world, clean, polished, full of control. Attorney Lewis looked like the kind of woman who doesn't miss a beat. Her navy suit was sharp, her posture straight, and she didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Let's start with what you're hoping to come away with," she said, sliding a legal pad toward me. I stared at it for a second, like it might bite. Through the glass wall behind her, I saw people walking by with laptops and Starbucks cups like it was just another Monday. But I was sitting here about to pour my broken marriage onto a piece of paper. I started talking. I told her about the malpractice case that cracked Darius's spirit in half, about how the hospital let him take the fall, how the media twisted the story, how the bourbon crept in after that. I told her about the night he punched a hole in the bathroom door. I told her about the burner phone I found, about the name in the contact list, peace, and how that word doesn't mean anything to me anymore. She listened without interrupting, nodding here and there, asking quick questions when she needed more detail. Then she pulled up something on her laptop, turned the screen toward me, and said, "Let's go over the finances." I leaned forward, already bracing for bad news, but I wasn't ready for what I saw. Credit card statements in my name, with charges I didn't recognize. Thousands of dollars spent on hotels, restaurants, luxury sneakers, online orders I never made. "These were opened under your joint credit profile," she said, tapping one of the statements. "But he listed only your name for authorization." I felt like I was staring at a stranger's life. I kept scrolling, numb, charges going back more than a year. "I didn't even know about these accounts," I whispered. She nodded again, like she hears that every day. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room, not because of the money, though that burned, but because he did all of this while I was busy trying to keep our life from falling apart. I was trying to fix things, to protect him, to keep Jade stable, and he was using my name to fund someone else's lifestyle. I sat back, stunned, a sour taste rising in my mouth. This wasn't just about bruises. This was betrayal in numbers. Attorney Lewis clicked through more tabs and started talking about legal options, protective order, temporary custody, possible spousal support. She spoke in calm, clear terms, like a teacher going through a lesson plan. But my brain kept short-circuiting. Every time I thought I was catching up, she added another thing to consider. Because of his public reputation and the previous media coverage, she said, it's likely his legal team will try to spin this as financial retaliation. They'll say you're taking advantage of a man who's already been destroyed by the system. That stung, because I knew it might work. Darius had already been painted as a victim once, a good black doctor ruined by bureaucracy and blame, and in some ways, it was true. I watched him fall apart. But I also lived with the man who used his downfall as an excuse to control me. I said that out loud. He was broken, yeah, I said, voice shaking. But I was the one he broke things on. She looked at me for a long second. That distinction matters, she said. And it's going to be our job to make sure the court understands it. Then she pulled out the divorce petition. Clean paper, black ink, lines where I had to sign. It sat between us like a challenge. I stared at my name at the top of the form. Monique Harris, legal petitioner. I never thought I'd be the one to start the end. My hands started to shake again, the same way they did at the station, at the hospital. I picked up the pen, put it down, picked it up again. You don't have to sign today, she offered gently. I shook my head. If I don't do it now, I'll keep finding reasons to wait, I said. My fingers gripped the pen tighter, and I signed. My signature didn't look like mine. It looked stiff, like someone else had written it. But I did it. I handed the form back and sat back in the chair, heart racing. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, hollow and full at the same time. I thought I'd feel relief, or maybe guilt again. But mostly, I felt like I had stepped out of one skin and into another, one where I didn't just survive. I acted. Walking out of that office, the sun hit my face, and it felt too bright for the day I just had. People brushed past me on the sidewalk, laughing, arguing, talking on Bluetooths. Normal. Everything was still so normal out here. Meanwhile, my entire life had just been folded into a manila folder. I felt like the wind could blow right through me. I kept walking until I hit the parking garage, found my car, and sat there for a minute with the engine off. I looked at myself in the mirror. No makeup, hair pulled back, eyes tired, but also different. Something had shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was choosing. That thought scared me more than anything, because it meant the next part was on me. No husband to blame, no mother to defer to, no excuses to hide behind. It was my name on that paper. My decision, my life, finally. And even though I didn't feel brave, I knew I'd just taken a step that mattered. Not for the court, not for the story, but for me, for the woman I was still trying to believe I had the right to become. The bench outside the courtroom felt like punishment. Hard wood pressing into my thighs, cold air crawling up my back. I held my purse like it was the only thing keeping me grounded, fingers digging into the straps until they ached. Darius walked past without a word, dressed sharp in that navy blazer I picked out for him years ago. He looked clean, fresh haircut, sober, respectable, like the man I used to know, or at least the version he wanted the court to see. His lawyer walked beside him, whispering something, and Darius didn't glance at me once. But I felt it, his anger, thick in the air like smoke. I forced myself to breathe slow. I could hear the clerk calling names, papers shuffling, the echo of shoes on tile. My hands were sweating. I kept thinking, this is real. This is really happening. I wasn't a wife coming to support her man. I was the woman he hurt, walking into a courtroom to speak it out loud. And there was no unspeaking it once it started. Inside, the courtroom was colder than the hallway. We were directed to opposite tables. Darius sat with his lawyer, calm and polished, posture straight like a man with nothing to hide. I could barely feel my legs as I sat down. My attorney leaned toward me and whispered, "Just stay focused. Answer honestly. Don't let them pull you into emotion." That was easier said than done. Everything moved in waves, fast when the judge spoke, slow when the lawyers started arguing. Darius's attorney started painting a picture of a man ruined by the world. A brilliant trauma surgeon, once celebrated, who became the target of a witch hunt after an unavoidable tragedy, she said. And now, his wife, who he supported through school, who he loved, is weaponizing that fall against him. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat frozen as she described me like a bitter, unstable woman lashing out. They didn't say the word gold digger, but they danced right up to the edge of it. I could feel eyes on me. I knew what they were seeing. Black woman, angry face, shaking hands. Untrustworthy. emotional, loud without even opening my mouth. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My knees popped. I faced the judge and told him about the fridge, about the bourbon, about the slammed doors and the hole in the bathroom wall. I kept my voice steady, even though my throat was dry as sandpaper. I said the words carefully, like each one might break in my mouth. He pushed me, I said, more than once. He screamed at our daughter. He made threats when he was drunk. I was scared. I am scared. I expected interruption, maybe some dramatic objection, but the courtroom stayed silent. The judge nodded slowly, then asked me directly, "Are you afraid of him now?" My heart stuttered. For a split second, I thought about saying something neutral. I don't know. Or, it's complicated. Because it was. I had loved him. I had built a life with him. I had seen him broken. But then Jade's scream rang in my head like a siren, and that moment made everything clear. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. Just like that. 3 words. And the weight of them sat in the center of the room like a stone. Darius looked at me then. First time all day. His eyes burned. He didn't yell, didn't speak, but his whole face said betrayal, like I'd stabbed him in the back right there in front of everyone. My stomach twisted. I almost looked away, almost apologized with my eyes, but I didn't. I held that look, even though it made me want to cry, and I reminded myself that I wasn't the one who had turned love into fear. The judge flipped through papers, asked a few final questions, then made his ruling. Temporary protective order granted. Temporary physical custody to me. Visitation to be discussed pending further evaluation. His gavel came down like thunder. My knees almost buckled. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't even feel safe. I just felt heavy, like I'd dragged my whole life through mud just to reach this exact point. And the worst part? It still wasn't over. We walked out without speaking. My lawyer touched my shoulder briefly and told me she'd be in touch about the next hearing. Darius disappeared with his attorney into a side hallway. I kept my eyes straight ahead. Each step felt like walking through water, thick and slow. When I got outside, the sun was too bright. The heat hit me in the face and I blinked, dizzy from the sudden shift. I sat on a bench by the steps and finally let myself breathe. I didn't cry. I didn't want pity. But my body was trembling, and I wrapped my arms around myself like I could hold myself together. It felt like I'd just kicked a man while he was drowning. That thought stayed with me, because maybe part of me still saw him that way, flailing, angry, broken. But the truth was, I'd been drowning too, and no one ever came to pull me out. So maybe today wasn't about hurting him. Maybe it was about finally choosing not to sink with him. I picked up my phone and saw a text from Tasha. How did it go? Is he locked up? I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the screen. Then another message came in, this one from Jade. Did we win? That one made my throat tighten. I stared at her words for a long time before I answered. No one won, I typed back, but we're safer, and that matters more. I hit send and stared out at the parking lot. Cars coming and going, people in and out of courtrooms with their own stories, their own battles. I was just one woman in a sea of decisions and consequences. But today, for the first time, I didn't feel like something was just happening to me. I'd stood up, spoken, said no, said yes, I'm afraid. Yes, I need protection. And even though it felt like my whole body had been turned inside out, that no I said today, it changed something. It opened a door I couldn't close again, and I wasn't planning to. The water was running over the collard greens, and my hands moved without thinking. Peel, rinse, snap. Mama stood next to me, drying dishes with the same towel she's probably had since I was in high school. The TV was on low in the other room, some gospel program humming through the walls, but the air between us was thick with something that hadn't been said yet. I kept my eyes on the sink, but I felt her watching me in that quiet way she does, like she's trying to figure out how deep the damage goes without asking directly. Then, just as I was reaching for the next bunch, she said it, real soft, without turning to look at me. I never wanted this life for you either, Monique. That sentence landed like a slap. My hands froze under the water. I took a deep breath, turned off the faucet, and faced her. "Then why?" I said, sharper than I meant to. "Did you keep telling me to stay? Why did you keep saying, 'A good wife stands by her man,' like it was scripture?" Her jaw tightened. She folded the towel slowly and then slammed it down on the counter. The noise echoed more than it should have. She didn't speak for a long moment, just stared at the counter like she was somewhere else. Then she said, "Because that's what I was told. That's what I believed." Her voice cracked a little. "You think I don't know what it feels like to be afraid of the man in your house?" That stopped me cold. She never talked like that before, not about Daddy, not in real words, just the vague, pretty phrases. "Marriage is hard. Your father had his struggles. We got through it. He didn't come home some nights," she said. "Did you know that? Of course you didn't. I kept that from you." I'd sit on that couch with the light on, praying harder like my mama told me to, thinking maybe it was me. Maybe I didn't cook the right dinner. Maybe I didn't show enough respect. And one night, he did come home, angry and smelling like liquor, and he pushed me into the dresser so hard I thought I lost you. My knees went weak. "You were pregnant with me?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "And no one told me to leave. No one told me I could. All I heard was 'fix it and don't shame the family.'" I leaned back against the fridge like it was holding me up. I didn't know what to say. All those years of her telling me to pray through it, to stay quiet, to give Darius grace. It wasn't just advice. It was survival training passed down like a family recipe. I thought she didn't understand. I thought she was judging me for wanting out. But now I saw it. She'd just been repeating what she'd learned, what her mother taught her, what the church whispered in her ear every Sunday. We both grew up learning how to shrink ourselves so no one else would feel uncomfortable. I shook my head. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. My voice broke. "Why did you make me feel like leaving would make me weak?" She looked up at me then, and her eyes were glassy. "Because I was scared," she said. "Not just for you, for what people would say, for what it meant about me if my daughter couldn't keep her marriage together either. I didn't want to see you walk through what I did. And I didn't know how to help you without feeling like I failed you." I turned the faucet back on just so I could put my hands under it again. I didn't want her to see my face, didn't want to cry, didn't want her pity. But she stepped closer and laid her hand on mine. For a second, we didn't say anything. We just stood there, two grown black women in a small Houston kitchen, trying to sort through years of silence. She gave my fingers a light squeeze. "I should have protected you better," she whispered, "but I didn't know how. And I'm sorry." I nodded, tears sliding down without permission now. "I didn't protect Jade either," I said. "I thought I was. I thought keeping it quiet meant keeping her safe." Mama looked at me, and I saw it click for her, the same way it had clicked for me the other night when Jade cried in my lap. Generational silence. The kind that leaves bruises on the soul even if no one ever sees a mark. We both cried there at the sink, quiet and messy, holding on to each other like the floor might disappear if we let go. By the time we sat down with tea at the kitchen table, the air felt different. Not light, but clearer. The truth had finally been spoken, and it left a bruise of its own. I was still angry, still hurt. She hadn't stopped it. She hadn't told me the truth when I needed it most. But now I understood she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to survive, the only way she knew how. And I wasn't just her daughter anymore. I was a mother too, with a daughter of my own. And I couldn't keep this cycle spinning just because it was familiar. "I don't want her to grow up thinking silence is strength," I said. "I don't want her to believe love means swallowing yourself." Mama looked at me, nodded slow. "Then you do it different," she said. "Even if it makes people talk. Even if it makes me uncomfortable sometimes." That part hit hard. She knew what I was thinking, knew I'd need to disappoint her again to do what's right. But she said it anyway, gave me permission I didn't know I needed. That night, as I drove back to Tasha's, the sky was a deep gray and the streetlights blinked on one by one like tired eyes. I kept thinking about the women in my family, my grandmother, my mother, me, and now Jade, and all the pain we tucked into corners and called normal. But I wasn't willing to hand that down to my daughter like it was just part of our inheritance. I was still hurt, still processing, but something had shifted. Mama wasn't just the woman who failed to protect me. She was a survivor who passed down silence because that's what she thought survival looked like. I couldn't change her past, I couldn't erase mine, but I could choose what came next. For Jade, for me, for the woman I was slowly becoming. And that meant telling the truth. Even when it broke the peace, even when it shook the roots of everything I was raised to believe. It meant starting over without shame, even if the voices around me kept whispering to go back. I slipped into a back pew before the second hymn ended, hoping nobody would see me, or at least that they'd pretend not to. But this is a black church in Houston, and people always see. The choir was singing total praise, voices rising like incense, and my heart was beating so hard I felt it in my throat. The bruise on my face had faded to a yellow-brown ghost, barely visible under makeup. But that didn't stop the glances. I saw Sister Corinne's eyes linger on me from the aisle. 2 rows ahead, Deacon Powell whispered something into his wife's ear. Darius wasn't here, thank God, but his mother was. She sat straight as a board in her usual front-row spot, lips tight, hat flawless, surrounded by her circle of loyal women like she was royalty in exile. I kept my gaze low, hands folded in my lap. I wasn't here to make a scene. I just needed to show up, needed to remember that faith still belonged to me too, even if it felt like the whole sanctuary was watching me like I'd walked in with a gun. After the benediction, I tried to slip out the side, but Sister Elaine caught my arm and gently pulled me into her office. The air inside was cool and quiet, and for a moment I thought she was going to pray with me. Instead, she locked the door, sat down at her desk, and opened her phone. "You need to see what's going around," she said, scrolling through screenshots of group chat messages. It was worse than I thought. "She turned on him," one woman wrote. "Ungrateful, that man saved lives." Another one said, "This feels like a money grab. She's been waiting for a moment to pounce." My cheeks burned as I read, a hot mix of shame and fury crawling up my neck. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to scream that they didn't know the half of it. But I just kept reading. Then came the ones from women I hadn't expected. Short, quiet messages that just said, "I believe her," or "Same thing happened to my cousin," or "I've been there." Small pieces of truth hidden between the gossip. My throat tightened. It hit me that those women weren't just defending me. They were watching to see what I'd do next. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opened the folder. There it was, the Ring camera video, the sound of Darius's voice slurring, the thud, my gasp, the sound of Jade screaming. I hovered my thumb over the share button, pulse racing. I knew what would happen if I sent it to the wrong people. It would go viral, people would pick it apart, judge my reactions, question my tone. But part of me also wanted to blast it wide open and say, "Here, this is what I've been living with. Believe me now." I looked at Sister Elaine. She didn't pressure me. She just said, "We don't all need to see it, just the ones judging with blind eyes." I nodded. My fingers were shaking, but I selected a list. Pastor Howard, the deacon board, the women's ministry leaders. The video would speak for itself. I didn't add a caption. I didn't explain. I just hit send. My stomach turned, but also, somewhere deep under the fear, I felt something loosen, like I'd taken back a piece of myself I didn't know I gave away. I stepped into the hallway just in time to see Darius's mother coming toward me. Her heels tapped fast against the floor, her face tight with rage. She didn't waste a second. "You're killing my son," she hissed. "The hospital case nearly ruined him, and now you're dragging him through court like he's trash? After everything he did for you?" I stood still. People were walking by, looking without looking. I could have walked away. I almost did. But I turned toward her and said, low and clear, "Your son almost finished me." Her mouth opened like she wanted to shout, but I didn't give her the chance. "You never asked what he did to me. You never asked what Jade saw. You never asked if I was safe. All you've ever cared about is what people think." My voice cracked, but I didn't back down. She looked stunned. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the fact that I was saying these things in church of all places. But I didn't owe her silence anymore. I didn't owe her protection for a man who never protected me. Back in my car, I sat for a minute with the engine off, breathing slow. I expected to feel guilt, maybe even regret. But what I felt was raw, sharp, clean, like I had pulled something out of myself that had been festering too long. I didn't plan to make a spectacle. I didn't stand up during testimony time and tell the congregation my business. I just sent the truth to the people who needed to see it. And if that made them uncomfortable, good. Truth should make people uncomfortable sometimes, especially the kind of truth we've been trained to hide. I looked up through the windshield at the church building, big, brick, full of people I loved and feared in equal measure. For a second I wondered if I'd ever feel fully welcome in there again. Maybe not. But I wasn't walking out of my faith just because some people in the building couldn't handle the truth. God knew what I'd lived through. And I wasn't leaving Him just because they wanted me to stay quiet. That night, I turned my phone face down before going to bed. I didn't want to see what came next. Not yet. Jade was already asleep in the next room, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about the women who whispered, "I believe her." I thought about my mama, about how silence got passed down like an heirloom, and I thought about how terrifying it still was to say, "This happened to me," even after everything. But I said it. I showed it. I didn't hide. And that gave me back something I'd been missing for a long time. Power. Not the kind that makes headlines. The quiet kind. The kind that lets you sleep without flinching. The kind that makes your daughter see you and know you chose her. I didn't burn the church down. I didn't run away either. I stayed. I told the truth. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The burner clicked but wouldn't catch, so I leaned in and tried again, adjusting the knob. I had barely used the stove since I moved in. Everything in the apartment still smelled like cardboard and new paint. The boxes were stacked in corners like they were waiting for permission to be opened. I told myself I'd unpack this weekend, once Jade got back from her sleepover. The quiet felt strange, but also safe, until the banging started. 3 hard knocks, fast and loud, shook the door. I froze. At first, I thought it was maintenance, maybe a package. But then I heard his voice, Darius, muffled through the door, but clear. "Monique," he shouted. "Open up, please. Just talk to me." My chest locked up. I backed away from the stove, hands trembling, heart slamming. "Come on, baby, don't do this," he said again, his tone swinging between soft and angry. "We're a family. We fix things. That's what real black families do." I grabbed my phone, hit 911, and gave my address with a voice so small I barely recognized it. "He's not supposed to be here," I whispered. "There's a protective order. He's yelling through the door, and I'm alone." He kept talking, begging, cursing, apologizing. His voice shifted every few seconds like he couldn't decide who to be, Sweet Darius or Storm Darius. I pressed my back against the fridge and slid down to the floor, phone still in hand. "You ruined my life," he shouted. "Everything I built, gone. You proud of that?" Then softer. "I miss you, Monique. I can't sleep without you. You don't mean all this. You can't." I covered my ears and curled into myself. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to feel it. But part of me still did. I remembered his laugh. His hands on my back when I used to cry about work. I remembered Sunday pancakes and Jade on his shoulders. But that version of him didn't exist anymore. And this version was on the other side of a door he wasn't supposed to be near. I could hear the sirens approaching, faint but getting closer. "You called the cops?" he shouted again, fury flaring in his voice. "Really? After everything I've been through?" I couldn't speak, couldn't answer. I just stayed frozen on the floor, gripping my phone like it was a weapon. When the red and blue lights washed through the blinds, I exhaled for the first time. The pounding stopped. The hallway filled with voices, firm, practiced. "Sir, step away from the door, hands visible, turn around." I couldn't see it, but I could hear it all. The rustling, the metal click of cuffs, the tension crackling like static. I stood up slowly, knees shaking, and opened the door just a crack. One officer looked at me, calm and professional. "You're safe now, ma'am. He's being taken in for violating the order." I nodded, couldn't find words. Darius was being led down the hallway in handcuffs, his face twisted when he saw me. Not rage, something else. Something that looked like heartbreak. "Monique," he said, almost whispering, "you really doing this to me?" I stared at him. I didn't yell, didn't cry. But my lip trembled, and I gripped the doorknob so tight my fingers hurt. "You did this to yourself," I finally said. He didn't fight, didn't resist. He just looked broken, and I hated that it still hurt to see him like that. Because it did. After they left, I closed the door and slid the deadbolt into place. I stood there for a long time, forehead resting against the wood, trying to slow my breathing. My whole body was buzzing like it had been hit with electricity. I walked into the living room and sat on the floor, surrounded by unopened boxes and blank walls. My chest was tight, and I started crying, loud, choking sobs that felt like they were clawing their way out of me. It wasn't just fear. It was grief. It was knowing I couldn't go back, that whatever pieces of him I still loved couldn't be separated from the damage, that no matter how many times he said he was sorry, it would never undo what he did to my body, my heart, or our daughter. I cried until my ribs hurt, until I had nothing left. I didn't call anyone, didn't check my phone. I just sat in that empty room, surrounded by silence that I had finally earned, even if it cost more than I ever imagined. And in that silence, I felt two truths sit side by side. I was the worst person in the world, and the bravest. Eventually, I wiped my face and pulled one of the boxes toward me. Kitchen stuff. I opened it slowly, pulled out a pan, some utensils. Unpacking didn't fix anything, but it gave me something to do with my hands. I put things away with care, almost like I was building a new version of myself with each drawer. One plate, one fork, one glass. This was my space. My name was on the lease. No one was yelling. No one was watching. I could breathe. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. Court, custody, judgment, rumors. But tonight, I was alone and safe. And that had to be enough. When I finished the box, I stood up, looked around the quiet, half-empty room, and whispered out loud to no one, "You made the right choice." I wasn't sure I fully believed it yet, but I needed to hear it. I needed to say it. Again and again if I had to. Until one day it felt like truth in my bones instead of something I had to convince myself of. That night, I lay down on the bare floor, wrapped in a blanket I pulled from another box, and stared at the ceiling. Jade would be home in the morning. I needed to be strong for her. I needed to be steady. But right now, it was just me, my sore body, and this little apartment with echoes in every corner. And still, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't waiting for footsteps, for doors slamming, for voices rising. I wasn't shrinking. I was just being. And for a woman who had spent years tiptoeing around someone else's storm, that stillness felt like the first real miracle. The smell of old coffee hit me as soon as I walked into the room. Not strong, just faint and stale, like something that had soaked into the carpet. There were folding chairs arranged in a circle, plain metal ones that scraped loudly against the floor when you sat down. I took the one closest to the door, just in case I needed to leave. Everyone was holding little white styrofoam cups. I grabbed one too, even though I wasn't thirsty. Something about holding it made me feel like I belonged. The sign outside the door had said, "Survivors Support Group." Walking through that door felt like crossing a line I'd spent years avoiding. It wasn't that I didn't know what I was, I just didn't want to say it out loud. A woman 2 seats down was talking about how her ex used to turn off the power during winter just to teach her a lesson. Another woman nodded like that made perfect sense. I couldn't imagine that kind of silence before, but here it felt normal, like pain had a place to sit. When it was my turn, I hesitated. My fingers squeezed the cup so hard I was afraid it might crack. I cleared my throat. "I'm Monique." A few heads nodded. No one rushed me. I took a breath. "I left my husband." There's a protective order. He was violent. The words came out slow, clumsy. It started after he lost his job. At first it was yelling, then it was drinking, then it was bruises. I glanced at the floor. I still feel bad for him. Isn't that stupid? One of the women, tall, gray sweater, kind eyes, shook her head gently. It's not stupid, she said. It's normal. We loved them. That doesn't just shut off. I kept going, told them about the fridge, about the night Jade screamed, about the part of me that still wants to fix it, even though I know I shouldn't. They didn't interrupt. No one gasped. They just listened like they'd heard it all before, and maybe they had. That made it easier to keep talking. For the first time in months, I didn't feel crazy. I felt heard. After the session, a woman named Carla walked with me to the parking lot. She told me she went back 3 times before she finally stayed gone. You're ahead of where I was, she said. The guilt, the doubt, that's part of it. But you're still out. Don't forget that. I nodded, too tired to say much, but her words stayed with me all the way home. That week, I started unpacking for real. Not just opening boxes, I mean really settling in. I hung Jade's clothes in the closet, folded her pajamas into drawers. I arranged my kitchen, lit a candle on the table. I caught myself planning meals based on what I liked, not what Darius would want. I bought the off-brand cereal Jade likes without thinking twice. I left the bathroom door open while I showered, just because I could. They were small things, but they felt like little rebellions. Like pieces of my life were finally mine again. I didn't have to be alert all the time. I could walk through my own space without tiptoeing around someone else's mood. Still, I wasn't all the way there. At night, I'd lay in bed and feel my body tense when I heard footsteps in the hallway, even though I knew it was just our upstairs neighbor. I still checked the lock twice before I went to sleep. Still jumped when my phone rang from an unknown number. And yes, sometimes I had to fight the urge to text him, to explain, to ask how he was. It was like my brain hadn't caught up with my decision. But I didn't text him. I didn't open his messages. I let them sit there like ghosts in my inbox. The strength didn't come all at once. It came in moments. Like when I told Carla I'd see her next week, or when I chose to rest instead of clean, or when I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't flinch. I was still scared, still tired, but I wasn't broken. I was learning how to live again, one decision at a time. One night, Jade and I were watching some silly baking show, and she leaned her head on my shoulder without saying anything. I didn't ask if she was okay. I just let her be. After a while, she whispered, "It's nice here. Quiet." I didn't know whether to smile or cry. "Yeah," I said. "It is." That's when I realized the apartment didn't feel like a hiding spot anymore. It felt like the start of something. Not a dream, not a fairy tale, but real, messy, honest, ours. I tucked her in later and watched her fall asleep with the door cracked open, just like she liked. Then I sat on the couch and let myself breathe. No noise, no fear. Just me, sitting in my own space, feeling tired but whole. It wasn't peace yet, but it was getting close. Before bed, I wrote down 3 things in my notebook. I didn't go back. I told the truth. I showed up. It didn't seem like much, but it was more than I thought I was capable of a few months ago. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and laid down in my bed, in a room that was mine, in a home that was safe. I wasn't healed yet, but I was healing. And that, for now, was enough. The courtroom felt smaller this time, or maybe I just felt bigger. I sat straight-backed in the same hard seat as before, only now I was wearing a simple navy blazer I'd bought with money from the account I used to call my just-in-case fund. Now it's just my savings, no quotation marks, no secrets. Jade sat beside me, her hand wrapped tight in mine. She looked older somehow, even though it had only been a few months. She didn't ask questions this time. She just showed up in her school uniform, quiet but steady. Across the aisle, Darius sat with his lawyer, eyes dull, beard grown in, looking like a faded photo of the man I used to love. He didn't look at me, didn't try to smile. He looked like someone caught in the middle of his own fall. The judge's voice echoed in that courtroom like a gavel itself, reading out the finalized divorce, the custody agreement, the probation terms for the order he violated. Every word landed like a closing door. But instead of feeling trapped, I felt freed. One painful, necessary word at a time. When the judge said I had primary custody and supervised visits were to be arranged at a center downtown, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My whole body sagged just a little, not in defeat, but in relief. Darius didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes on the table. Outside, the sun was too bright, like it had no idea what just happened inside. Darius asked quietly if he could say goodbye to Jade. I hesitated, then stepped aside, watching them talk a few feet away. She didn't smile, but she didn't shrink either. She looked him in the eye, nodded at whatever he said, and hugged him like she meant it. That part stung more than I expected. It reminded me that he wasn't just my mistake. He was her father. And love doesn't vanish just because it hurts. Watching them felt like holding my breath underwater. But when she walked back to me, took my hand again and said, "Can we get ice cream?" I knew we'd be okay. We didn't get ice cream, though. We went to the hardware store. Jade picked out a new front door lock like she was choosing a crown jewel. She held up 2 options, and I let her pick the shiny brass one. "This one feels stronger," she said. I nodded. At checkout, she found a silly keychain shaped like a silver heart that said, "Boss." She grinned and tossed it onto the counter. "That one's for you." I laughed and tried not to cry. We drove home, our home, and I changed the lock myself while she sat on the floor sorting nails like puzzle pieces. The first time I turned the new key in the door, something inside me clicked too. Not just the lock. It felt like something symbolic, like I'd just taken control of something I didn't even realize I'd given up. That night, the apartment smelled like clean sheets and takeout noodles. Jade did her homework at the kitchen counter while I paid bills from my own bank account. I still had that ache in my chest, like grief was curling up in the corner waiting to be fed. But it didn't consume me this time. I walked past it. I set a timer for the laundry. I tucked my daughter into bed. She asked if things would stay like this for a while. I told her yes, and meant it. I didn't have all the answers, but I had stability, safety, and a new lock with only 2 keys, both of them in our hands. That was more than I'd had in years. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fridge, the ticking of a cheap wall clock, the regular rise and fall of my daughter's breath down the hall. No fighting, no yelling, no walking on eggshells. I kept thinking about the words people use, custody, divorce, probation, as if they were just paperwork. But they're not. They're bruises that turned into boundaries, wounds that finally got names, choices that cost everything and still had to be made. I didn't feel happy, but I felt clean. I felt like I could look at myself in the mirror without shame. That's not the ending of something. That's the start of something new. So much of this journey has been about loss, losing a man, a marriage, an image of what my life was supposed to look like. But sitting there in the quiet, I started to realize I've also gained things. Space, clarity, a voice I'm not afraid to use anymore. I don't know what's next. There'll be hard days, shared holidays, Jade's questions, moments when I feel lonelier than I thought I could stand. But I've built something from the rubble, and this time the foundation is mine. No more walking on glass. No more shrinking. I may not feel healed yet, but I feel whole. And for the first time, that is enough. If you made it to the end of my story, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It means more than you know. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to support more real stories like this one. There are many others here that speak to pain, healing, and starting over, and I hope one of them finds you at the right moment. With love and respect, always.